The conference room in Beijing fell silent. It was 2019, and military officials from across Asia had gathered for a joint tactical summit. When the Philippine delegation presented their mountain warfare strategy, General Wang Jiming stood up and interrupted with a dismissive laugh that echoed through the hall. "With all due respect," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "your soldiers are too small. The average Filipino soldier is what? 5'5", 5'6". Modern warfare requires physical dominance. Size matters in combat. This is basic military science." The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. The Chinese general continued, pointing at the tactical displays. "You want us to study infiltration techniques from soldiers who can barely carry a full combat load. Your men would be overpowered in hand-to-hand combat. They lack the reach, the strength, the physical presence needed on a modern battlefield." Colonel Ramon Santos of the Philippine Army sat quietly, his face expressionless. He had heard this before. For decades, Philippine soldiers had been underestimated because of their stature. What General Wang didn't know was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his military career. "General Wang," Colonel Santos said calmly, standing up, "would you be interested in a demonstration? A joint training exercise between our forces?" The Chinese general smirked. "A demonstration? You mean watching your soldiers struggle with equipment designed for real fighters?" The room laughed nervously. "Fine. Let's make it interesting. Send your best unit. We'll send ours. Jungle warfare scenario. 1 week. Let's see if size really doesn't matter." 3 months later, in the dense jungles of Mindanao, Philippines, the exercise began. China sent their elite mountain division, 180 soldiers, each standing over 6 feet tall, trained in high-altitude combat, equipped with the latest gear. These were China's best. Special operations forces who had trained in Tibet, masters of mountain warfare, physically imposing warriors who had never lost an exercise. The Philippine side sent the Scout Rangers, a unit that General Wang had personally called too small to be effective. Their average height was 5'6". Their average weight was 140 pounds. They looked like teenagers next to the towering Chinese soldiers. The scenario was simple: capture the flag in a 50-square-kilometer jungle zone. 7 days. Full combat simulation. International observers from the United States, Australia, and Japan watched from the command center, curious to see how this would play out. Day 1, the Chinese forces moved with impressive precision. They established a base camp, set up perimeter defenses, and began systematic grid searches. Their strategy was textbook: overwhelming force, superior firepower, dominate the terrain through sheer physical presence. The Scout Rangers seemed to vanish. The Chinese soldiers couldn't find them. Thermal imaging picked up nothing. Drone surveillance saw only jungle canopy. It was as if the Filipino soldiers had dissolved into the forest itself. On day 2, strange things started happening. Chinese supply caches disappeared. Sentries reported hearing movements but saw nothing. Communication equipment malfunctioned mysteriously. The towering Chinese soldiers began to feel something they rarely experienced: unease. By day 3, the Chinese forces were frustrated. They had covered 60% of the zone and found nothing. "Where are they?" General Wang demanded over the radio from the observation post. "They can't just disappear." But that's exactly what the Scout Rangers had done. What General Wang didn't understand was that these small Filipino soldiers had been born in these jungles. They had grown up hunting in terrain like this. They knew every sound, every shadow, every way to move without being seen. The Scout Rangers weren't fighting the way the Chinese expected. They weren't trying to overpower anyone. They were using 3 centuries of guerrilla warfare knowledge passed down through generations. They moved through the jungle like water, taking paths the larger Chinese soldiers couldn't fit through. climbing trees the heavier men couldn't scale, hiding in spaces that seemed impossible. On day 4, the exercise took a dramatic turn. The Chinese flag, the one they were supposed to be defending, was gone. In its place, a Philippine flag flew at the Chinese base camp. The Scout Rangers had infiltrated the heavily guarded camp, taken the flag, replaced it, and disappeared without a single alarm being triggered. The Chinese soldiers were stunned. "How is this possible?" they radioed to command. General Wang's face went pale. International observers leaned forward in disbelief. But the Scout Rangers weren't finished. Over the next 2 days, they systematically eliminated Chinese soldiers in the exercise using paint markers, the simulation's version of combat. The tall, physically imposing Chinese soldiers never saw them coming. A Scout Ranger would appear from the jungle, mark a target, and vanish before anyone could react. The smaller Filipino soldiers moved under cover that the taller Chinese soldiers disturbed. They fit into hiding spots their larger opponents couldn't imagine. They climbed terrain the heavier soldiers struggled with. Their disadvantage had become their greatest weapon. By day 7, the Scout Rangers had captured both flags, eliminated 70% of the Chinese force, and controlled the entire operational zone. The Chinese Mountain Division, considered among the best in Asia, had been completely outmaneuvered by soldiers they had mocked as too small. When the exercise ended, General Wang stood in silence as Colonel Santos approached. The Philippine officer didn't gloat. He simply extended his hand and said, "General, in the jungle, it's not about who's bigger, it's about who belongs there." The international observers were stunned. The American liaison officer immediately requested a briefing on Scout Ranger tactics. The Australian commander asked about joint training opportunities. The Japanese observer took extensive notes. In 1 week, the Scout Rangers had changed how military strategists thought about jungle warfare. What happened next shocked the entire military world. Within 6 months, the United States Special Operations Command invited the Scout Rangers to Fort Benning to teach jungle warfare tactics to American Special Forces. The Australian SAS requested cross-training programs. Even NATO forces began studying Filipino small unit tactics. General Wang, to his credit, returned to Beijing and submitted a classified report that changed Chinese military doctrine. He wrote, "We have been training for the wrong war. Physical size means nothing in jungle terrain. The Philippine Scout Rangers have mastered a form of warfare we don't understand. We must learn from them." Today, the Philippine Scout Rangers are considered among the world's elite jungle warfare specialists. Military academies from West Point to Sandhurst study their tactics. Special forces from around the globe train with them in the jungles of the Philippines. The soldiers once mocked as too small are now teaching some of the world's largest militaries how to fight. Colonel Santos never forgot General Wang's words. Years later, when asked about that day in Beijing, he smiled and said, "He taught us an important lesson. Never let someone else's limitations become your identity. We knew what we were capable of. We just needed the chance to prove it." The Scout Rangers didn't win because they were small. They won because they understood that in warfare, adaptability beats size, knowledge beats strength, and belonging to the terrain beats dominating it. 300 years of Filipino guerrilla tradition had taught them what modern military science was just learning. The best warrior isn't always the biggest one.